debts by British merchants, which Americans agree British merchants could pursue. Some involve the return of loyalist property, which the Congress agrees to suggest to individual states. But once, I think to some extent, if we were looking at history and we say, once that treaty is sort of agreed upon, now you have a sovereign independent country. Now the challenge is, okay, can these people who wanted to break away from England on a principle, and the principles were articulated in the Declaration of Independence, bring to life a country that is based on those principles? In other words, can they establish a nation that is based on the principles in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and that the power of government emanates from the consent of the governed? And this becomes the challenge. It becomes the challenge from 1783 up until today, the challenge as to whether that can happen. And I think the history of the United States, there have been times, like we talked about today, where the fragile nation, the fragile nature of kind of attempting to do that was challenged. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt takes the oath of office on May the 4th, 1933, and basically the financial system of the United States had ground to a halt and the economy had basically bottomed out, that challenge was, okay, can this Republican experiment, this experiment in self-government, endure that? Right? There have been periodic times. So we went back to 1783. In the aftermath of the Constitution, in the aftermath of the Treaty of Paris, now the challenge is, okay, how's this all going to unfold? And there, we talked about a lot of aspects. One thing, and I don't want to go over this, I don't want to breeze over this because this was the question last year. But the DBQ question last year involved slavery in the Revolutionary period. Now, we talked about that. We said, okay, when the Civil War was over, or not Civil War, the Revolutionary War was over, how did these ideas of liberty and the equality of man, all men being equal, affect the institution of slavery, which was established in the United States? And we made the argument that the Revolutionary War assaulted slavery. That clearly the Founding Fathers and others saw the inconsistency between holding slaves and the principles that the war was fought upon. And they saw that inconsistency. And, we said that, in the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, states, Pennsylvania and North, progressively liberated their slaves, and there was discussion of liberating slaves in other states. Even as late as 1830, they were talking about emancipating slaves in Virginia. And people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, slave holders, were talking about the immorality of slavery. But we did say this, that although the Revolutionary War assaults slavery, and although probably 1 in 10 people who were enslaved in America prior to the war were liberated in one manner or another after the war, slavery endures the Revolutionary War. It continues. Other things to consider is, another thing to stretch out in terms of the Revolution is not just slaves, but what about the common folk? What about the common people that, fought in this war for liberty, for freedom, and fought for the principle of that all men are created equal? What role would they play in the new nation? How powerful, how democratic would this new nation be? And when we use the word democratic, meaning how much influence would the people have over the power of government? Now, we knew we were going to have self-government, but how is that going to sort of unfold this self-government? That's the big challenge. And we kind of talked about that in two ways. We said, all right, how is this notion of self-government going to unfold on the local level, state governments, and how is it going to unfold on the national level, right? A national government. In terms of state governments, I think that we could, quickly go over and say that every single colony reconstituted itself as a state. And those 13 original states joined together in one nation. And each state had a new constitution. Each state, sometimes that constitution was not remarkably changed from what they did when they were a colony, right? When they had a governor, they had a lower house, an upper house. To some extent, any vestiges of England, like the governor or like the upper house, were weakened in the immediate aftermath of the Revolution. But we really, we kind of went through that kind of quickly because we said, it's no great feat for these 13 now states that are a part of the United States, right? And if you think about it, at this juncture, the question is, what does that union mean? Are these 13 states sovereign and joined together as sovereign states? Are these 13 states provinces in one nation? The nature of that union is something, if you think about it politically, that's going to be disputed and debated right up and through the Civil War. For that matter, it's debated today. Doesn't Texas and Idaho want to secede from the Union? I heard that people in Texas say we want to secede, we don't like the health care plan, so we want out, right, of the Union. So the sort of tension between, sort of divided sovereignty between state sovereignty and national sovereignty, something that's got to play out. But what we're most interested in is the national government. Can these people establish a national government that is going to preserve the principles of the Declaration of Independence? And we know the first attempt to do it is called the Articles of Confederation. Whose pen is usually whose pen are the Articles of Confederation typically attributed to? Does anybody know besides the instructor? Yes. You say John Dickinson. Yes, correctly. John Dickinson was the head of the committee that was responsible to draft a system of central government. Now, the system of central government that was eventually ratified by all 13 states, an agreement that they would adhere to this system of government, we call the Articles of Confederation, right? Now, under the Articles of Confederation, what do you remember? What do you remember about the central government under the Articles of Confederation? Yes, dear Samantha. What?
They didn't have the right to tax.
The national government did not have the right to tax. What else do you remember? Go ahead.
They could borrow and print money.
Oh, they could borrow and print money. We know that. What else? What else? Do you remember anything else? Yes.
Establish post office.
They could establish a post office. Yes, go ahead.
They could accept states.
They could admit new states into the Union, right? So you have it all listed there. What we put on the board. That is wonderful that you have it all right there. If you were to describe what made up this new government, it was kind of limited. Limited to what? Under the Articles of Confederation, the national government was what? Yes.
Weak.
Well, it was weak, but it was what? Yes.
They could not levy taxes.
Oh, we're in the wrong paper now.
That wasn't the question.
It was just Congress.
What?
It was just a Congress.
It was just a Congress. It was a unicameral legislature. So under the Articles of Confederation, the national government was one Congress. Basically what they did is make the Continental Congress the central government. Right? The Second Continental Congress convened in 1775 and basically never went out of session. It just was confirmed as the national government. Because think about it. Under the Articles of Confederation, which were ratified in 1781 formally, every state could send delegates to Congress. They could send as many as they wanted to, but they had to send 2. Regardless of how many they sent, they only got 1 vote per state, right? So it was a delegation from each state that went to a single unicameral legislature, right? And they had 1 vote. Now that legislature had the power to do a number of things: to declare war, to make peace, to establish a post office, to deal with the Native Americans, to admit new states into the Union. But it did not have the power to do other things like levy taxes, raise an army, or regulate trade amongst these states. And so, basically, purposely and logically, the Articles of Confederation created a weak central government. Now, that was purposeful. Colonial Americans fresh off of a revolution against England.